So today we're going to make this washcloth, and I use just 100% cotton. You can use anyone. This one I get from Hobby Lobby. And then I'm going to use a size 8 knitting needle. You can use straight or curved. So the first thing we need to do is cast on 37 stitches, and we're going to use a long tail cast on. So we're going to probably take about 3 feet of yarn, and we're going to put a slip knot in it. So how I do that is I put it over my finger, twist it around, pull it through. And then for casting on, how I do that with the long tail cast on is I have the 2 pieces of yarn. You're going to put it in your hand and pull down, and then you're going to stick your thumb and finger through there and bring it down kind of like a heart. And when you do that, you're going to see this teardrop shape on your thumb. You're going to scoop it off your finger, come around, and then do the same thing over here. Pull it off your finger, and then drop your fingers. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to pull both down in my fist, put my thumb and my forefinger through, make that heart shape, and we're going to scoop through this teardrop, scoop through this teardrop. And that is a long tail cast on. That's what the bottom looks like. So I'm just going to continue to do this slowly so you can watch. We're going to grab, put our finger through, scoop, scoop. And you can readjust each time. So I'm going to grab it in my fist, pull down, put my forefinger or my pointer finger and my thumb through. I'm going to find that teardrop here, pull that yarn through. And again, we're going to do 37 of those, including our slip knot. So right now I have 5. So pull through, forefinger and thumb through, pull down, find that teardrop shape, and pull through. And then you just pull that tight. You want to leave some space. Don't make these too tight. Give yourself some space between each one, because you can make these super tight, like if I tighten this down really hard, but then it's going to be hard to pick up those stitches. So make sure you give yourself some space. It's okay if it's a little looser. It's actually easier to pick up your stitches if you let it be a little looser. So I'm just going to continue to pick up stitches. And I need 37 of these. Okay, so now that I've cast on 37 stitches, we're gonna forget this exists for now. So working off the yarn attached to your ball, we are going to start to knit. And so let's look at how we're mounted on the needle. You have a loop here. The side facing you is the front post. This is the back post. And to knit, we're going to go from the front to the back. So we're going to go through that front post to the back. We're going to bring that around. Oop, I dropped it. That first stitch is always a little hard. We're going to bring that around, scoop it around that needle. Okay, I'm having a few issues. And then we're going to slide that off our needle. You might have to adjust the tension. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot everything up again. Looking at how it's on the needle, we've got our front post and our back post. We're going to go through front to back. It may take you a minute to get through there. And then we're going to take the yarn off of our yarn ball, loop it around, and then scoop it through. Take your time with this. It may take a couple tries to get it, but again, we're going to go front to back, bring our yarn around, and through. So things that might help you. This is called English knitting. I'm leaving my yarn just resting out here. I'm not tensioning with my other hand. So bring it around. What might help is if you lift your needles apart and slide that yarn through those two needles. Now that my working yarn is underneath my needle right there, and now I'm just going to take the tip of my needle and slide it around, push up, and bring my stitch off. So again, we're going to bring this around, kind of lift our needles apart, and now you can see my working yarn is underneath the needle between the two, and we're just going to bring that tip down around and push up. So to knit, we're going to bring our yarn around, and then if you kind of give that a little tug down, you don't even have to do much. That brings it under this top working or this top needle, and then we can slide our needle down and around and up and slide that stitch off. And this is a basic knit stitch. So we're going to bring it around, kind of give it a nice little tug down. Now it's below the other needle, scoop, push up. So around, little tug down. You can kind of hear my needles kind of click together as it comes through. Push up. So again, we're going from front to back. We're bringing our yarn up and around. Give it a gentle tug down, go between those two needles, slip through and up. So let's do that again. Now you may need to adjust your stitches up as you work. So front to back, bring our yarn around, kind of give it a little tug down so it's between the needles underneath this one needle. Here's our upper needle, here's our working needle. We want it beneath. And then it's just a quick swoop down around your needle. You bring the one tip of the needle around the other one, and push it up, and you will have a stitch on there. Now we're just going to knit across the whole wash rag. And so we go again, front to back, around, give that a light tug so it's underneath there, and then pull through. We don't need to be, if you're putting too much pressure on this, you might be splitting your yarn or getting frustrated. I'm gently putting that from front to back. Bring the yarn around and give it just a gentle tug, and now my yarn is between there. And then you just slide the tip of your needle around, up, and lift that stitch off. Now, like I said, this is English knitting. I'm going to show continental knitting in a second, but it is the same process. But if you have been a crocheter prior to picking up knitting, it might make more sense to you to knit continental, which is what I normally knit. But I feel like English is very friendly for beginners who don't want to worry about tensioning their yarn while picking up stitches and everything. Because with English knitting, I can just drop that working yarn and not worry about it while I'm working my stitches. These last stitches can be a little tricky. Just take your time, go slow, one stitch at a time. And so there we go. We are basically just going to be throwing these stitches back and forth between our needles. So here I have 37 stitches cast on and knit once. And so we have started the base to our stitches. So we're going to do 5 knit rows, and we're just going to continue to knit. We're going to flip this over. Now, one thing you need to be careful to do when you flip this over is bring your yarn under to the back. And I'll show you why. If you bring it under to the back, you've got 1 stitch there. That's 1 stitch. If you notice that your stitch count keeps increasing, it might be because you're pulling this to the back over your needle, and that gives you that weird loop. So bring it down and back, and then you can continue to knit like we've been doing. Now I'm going to show continental knitting, because I think there will be quite a few who might feel. So this is how I normally knit. Tension your yarn however you feel. Some people do a pinky over. However you crochet, you tension your crochet is how you would tension in continental. So I use this hand and I do the same thing I was doing before, except instead of like before when I would pull my yarn over, I'd pull it down and it would get between the needles. Here, I've got to go up through, wrap my yarn, and then I lift my needles apart and kind of slide that together. Again, we want this loop to be under that needle. It's right there. And then we're going to slide our needle tip around up and pull the yarn off, or our loop off. Continental can be a bit faster if you're used to tensioning. I believe English is a lot easier to learn for a beginner. So I will, after this row, I will do the rest English style, but that I just want to show you how you would work that as a continental knitter. And as continental, so if you just wrap and pull down, the yarn's going to go down in between those needles and around. So I alternate back and forth between continental and English. I use English when I'm working with two colors because I can hold my main color in my left hand and my additional color in my right hand. So both of them have their place in knitting. I just think teaching beginners who might have struggled with tensioning in the past, it's easier to teach English knitting. So, as that's my preferred way, you can see I'm a lot faster that way. So there's one, and so this stitch, even though we knit on the front and back, is called a garter stitch, and that's what we're doing. This section right here, it's hard to see on this texture, but this right here where it looks like rows, that is called garter. Then we're going to go in and do this. So let me see. We do 5 rows of knit stitches. So I'm going to work another row of English, and then I'll speed up to the point where we're at the moss stitch. Don't worry about having too tight of tension. It's actually easier to work these stitches if you're not super, like if you're pulling on your yarn, on your working yarn too much, it will make a smaller washcloth, but it will also be harder for you to pick up your stitches. So just keep you want to keep an even tension, but just not too much. So again, I'm going to go front to back, around, and through. Front to back, pull my yarn down. You can drop it at that point. Once it's under this other needle, slip the tip of your needle around that and up. That's what it looks like. That's 3 rows of garter stitch. Now I'm going to do, I said 5. It's 10 rows of garter stitch. So we're going to do 10 rows of garter stitch, and then we're going to do the moss stitch. So just a reminder, when you turn your work, make sure you bring that yarn under when you scoop that first stitch. And so I will pick back up when I've done 10 rows. So I went ahead and switched over to circulars. It's easier to work on this flat surface with these smaller needles. The size is the same. They just are shorter this way. So this is what 10 rows of garter stitch looks like. And now we're going to move on to this next part. Because of the color of this yarn, you can't see very well, but we're going to use a combination of knits and purls to make what's called the moss stitch. So what we're going to do, we've got our working yarn up here. We're going to knit the first stitch. And then we're going to purl the next stitch. And so what that looks like is back to our stitch construction. We have the front post and the back post. When we knit or purl, remember, you always want to open up this stitch. You never want to cross it. So you don't want your stitch to look like, so see how there's 2 legs? So when we knit, we open that stitch up. And when we purl, we basically go the opposite direction. We're not bringing this back leg around like that to where we're crossing our stitch down here. We're going to pick up that front leg and go forward. Oh, I missed a step because I was explaining that. All right, so when we knit, our yarn is behind our work. When we purl, we bring it through our needles to the front. Again, now we're going back to front. So we're going from the back to the front. We're going to wrap our yarn again and bring it through. It's basically knit reverse. So now we're going to put our yarn back between our 2 needles to the front. We're going to wrap our yarn, give it a little tug down. Now it's below here. Loop our thing around. Now we're going to pick up that yarn, bring it through, and then we're going to go from back to front through that front post. Bring our yarn down and around. Now it's between. We're going to slide that around and bring our stitch off. So when you knit, your yarn is in the back, and when you purl, your yarn is in the front. And we just bring that between the needles. So we're going back to front. We picked up that front leg. We're going to wrap that around and give it just a tiny pull down. Now it's between our 2 needles. We're going to scoop that around and pull our stitch off. Now we're going to go back to knit position. So we're going to put our yarn in the back. We're still looking at that front post, and we're going to go through this front to back, opening that stitch up, wrapping our yarn, give that just a tiny tug down till it's between these 2 stitches, or these 2 needles, and lift it off. Now we're going to go back to purl, which bring our yarn between our needles in front. We're going to go back to front. We're going to wrap, give that the tiny tug down. I messed up a stitch, so I am gonna go, did I do that wrong? Yes, so that's a knit stitch. I can tell because these purl stitches have the loop in front and knit stitches go around that post. So I am going to go below here and go back into that stitch and drop that off, and then just pull my yarn out of there. And that's how we go back a stitch. So I need to bring my yarn in front to purl. Oop, I did that wrong. There we go. And there we go. We're back on track. Except I need to put my yarn in the back. A little tangled up around my, there we go. Okay, so I'm knitting next. I know that because I just did a purl stitch, and you can tell because here's a knit stitch. This is a purl stitch side by side. How you'll tell the differences between these is if you're looking at the loop, if the yarn goes around the post and the post is in front, this is a knit stitch. If you've got that little bar there and the post is behind it, this stitch being the post, that is a purl stitch. So my yarn is in back. I'm going to wrap and pull. Now, if my yarn was in front, bring my yarn to the front. There we go. Back to English style. My yarn is in back. We're going to knit. Drop that stitch off. Bring our yarn through. And now we're going to purl. Nope, my yarn's still in front. I'm not as used to English knitting, but I do feel like it's easier because you don't have to tension it. Bring our yarn through. Wrap. Bring our yarn to the back. Gotta keep remembering to switch your yarn front to back. May take a couple of times, may take a couple of rows, but as before, we're going to do 10 rows of the moss stitch. And I'll show you how we create that moss stitch here in just a minute. I'll try to do it the other way. Alrighty. So you can't really tell a difference too much yet, but you can see how these alternate. We've got a purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. And so when we flip this over and we look at this stitch, it looks like a purl stitch because knit and purl are just the inverse of each other. So a purl is the back of a knit stitch. So this looks like it purls. So what we're going to do is the same thing we just did. We're going to, because we started on an uneven number, 37, we can just knit, purl, in the same way we were already starting with. And I'll go back to English so you can see it. So bring our yarn in front. We're going to knit. We're going to bring that down. So we're going to bring our yarn through. We're going to wrap, get that little tug down so our yarn is down in there. Slide it off. Bring our yarn in front. Slide that around and up, off. That should be it. So if you did this right, you should always start and end with a knit stitch. And that's what we'll do going both directions. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl until we end on a knit. And as you can see, it's hard with this different colored, but we're making a little bit of a texture here. It's kind of going to go up in a diagonal, which gives just a beautiful scrub to this washcloth. So again, we're going to do 10 rows of what's called the moss stitch, and you should start with a knit stitch and end with a knit stitch. So again, do 10 rows of the moss stitch. Here is 10 rows of the moss stitch. And so we're going to continue. We're going to do 50 rows total. We're going to do, so we have 10 garter, 10 moss, 10 garter, 10 moss, 10 more garter. So that would be 50 stitches or 50 rows. So just continue garter stitch. You just knit both directions for 10 rows, and then we'll switch back to the moss stitch. And then when that's all done, I'll come back and show you how to cast off. Okay, so now that we have 50 rows on here, I am going to show you the cast off I'm using on this. So we're going to start, we're going to pull that under, and we're going to start by knitting 2 stitches. Knit 1, knit 2, then we're going to pick up this back stitch and pull it over. So now we have 1 stitch on there. So we're going to knit another stitch, pick up that stitch, and cast it off. So we knit 1, cast a stitch off. Knit 1, cast a stitch off. This is actually a pretty quick process. If I was doing it English, let's see. We're going to knit 1 and cast a stitch off. I prefer to do continental style, but you can do it either way. So knit 1, cast off. What you're going to be left with is this nice, beautiful edge. And then once you get done, you can just snip your yarn and weave in your ends, and you will have a beautiful handmade washcloth. And you can do as many rows as you want. If you wanted more of a square wash rag, you could do another 2 sections of the moss stitch and the garter stitch, but that's where we're going to end for this class.